Hey everyone, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Anna D, who is the founder of Unity Chiropractic Wellness. She's a doctor. She has a doctorate of chiropractic medicine, and then is also has a corrective exercise specialist certification as well, or designation. I guess is the correct terminology. And yeah, I'm really excited to introduce to her. She's one of the top rated doctors on Zocdoc. That's actually how I found her. And she's been killing it ever since, it sounds like.
Yeah, hi Davidson. Thanks for inviting me to your podcast, to something that you've been passionately doing for a while, and I'm very glad to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certain people that have this energy that, like they're just gonna crush it in life. And ever since I met you, you've been very, very generous with not only your time and energy and contributing to orphans in Vietnam, and now we've expanded it to Thailand and Indonesia. So
Yeah,
thank you for your very, very generous contributions there.
you're very
And
welcome. Davidson, you're also someone who, like, I've just never really met many people like you. And I remember I was like, how is this guy able to connect so many people together? And how does this guy know so many people and has the energy to host all of these networking events and also
uh,
still remain like, giving everybody a personalized attention and bringing everybody together? And I was like, I had to ask like what your sign was, and you were like, "Oh, you're a Leo, right?" And I was like, I've never really believed in any like astrology signs or anything, but when I met other people who were like pretty similar in that they gathered people together, I noticed that they were all Leos as well. So I don't
ah,
know if it's astrology or
hmm.
whatever, but you are definitely a remarkable person, and I'm very happy
Oh,
to be a part of this and everything that you do.
oh, that's very generous. Yeah, that it's the Leo. It's interesting because I also don't follow a lot of that too. And yeah, you're right. I remember working at a company where there was four of us in the same section on the same team, and we were all Leos, and we all sat next to each other. And
Okay.
it was just crazy because like there's the office was maybe 300 people in that floor, like it was like pretty big office, and we definitely like were the life of the party, and we would
No,
always
big
be
Leo energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. People would just be like, man, these guys like have a lot of energy. And people would always be like,
Yeah.
what is going on over there?
Yeah. I believe it. I believe it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think one of the unique things is like, I mean, you're also a bodybuilder, like you do a lot of different things. Like, how do you know like what to focus on? And I know we talked a lot about like how do you know when's the right time to start your own business? Because I think that's probably the most common question that people ask.
So that's definitely a very good question, because I knew it was, well, I never really knew when was the right time to start my own business, because there was definitely some chiropractors who got out of school and went straight to business. And there were
Hmm.
some that maybe waited a year and then, found the space to lease from, after getting like a big business loan. But
Hmm.
with me, I was working for somebody else for maybe about 3 years, 3.5 years. And I always thought on this, like in the back of my mind, oh, eventually when I save up enough, I'm going to write a business proposal. I'm going to bring it to the bank, and I'm going to lease a large space with like 3 rooms, and I'm going to pay for all of the tables. I'm going to pay for a billing staff. I'm going to pay for a front desk, but I need to save all of that up first before I start business. And that was my original thought. That was how I originally thought I wanted to start my practice, with like a huge safety net of like, maybe like at least 3 months worth of rent. I wanted to have everything ready and going, and then, sit there and have the patients come in. But then because of the whole pandemic situation, actually, I started my business in February of 2020, after, not 2020, February of 2021. So actually this year, I started my business February 2020 of this year. And everything was still very, very slow. People weren't coming back into the city yet. And I managed to just kind of cold message physical therapists on LinkedIn to see if anybody wanted to sublease office space for me. So because I messaged someone who had an existing office with, an existing front staff, an existing, setup with like tables everywhere, and, an existing patient base, I was able to just message the physical therapist that I work with, who's integrated physical therapy. And I said, hey, I used to work around Grand Central working for somebody else. Now I don't work there anymore. So could I, maybe sublease from you and pay like a certain amount? Now, the original amount I had proposed was like really, really, really lowballing like physical therapist, because I really couldn't afford much. I just knew I needed to start business now because I felt that I was kind of not giving as much time as I wanted to patients at my other job, because I had to see a lot of people all like within a short amount of time. But anyway, so I gave the physical therapist a really, really low offer for like my monthly rent. And he said, I'm going to need like 50% more than that. So I, was like, okay, I'll talk to my people. And I talked to my parents, and my parents were basically like, okay, well, if you're very, very certain that you want to start business, we've got a little bit of money saved up in a TD bank, and you could just like use that money, right? So thank goodness I had that extra money that I was able to start, I was able to be able to afford the extra 50% that he was proposing. And my dad was like, oh, make sure that you don't skimp on the advertising. He was like, put ads on the newspapers and stuff, because he's Chinese. So he only like, looks at advertisements on the newspapers and stuff. So I started business, and at first I thought that I would just be sitting there kind of like twiddling my thumbs while I wait for patients to show up, right? But actually, the business actually like hit the ground running because I had an existing amount of reviews from my old office, right? So what I suggest to an aspiring, entrepreneur is to like start off, like if you could, get your reviews up and get your reputation up under someone else's expense, right?
Yeah.
And even if, maybe the place that you're working at, you're not getting any reviews, you should take the time to ask the customers, ask the patients, can you leave a review under my like Google business name or under my Zocdoc? Because you yourself could start a Google business page and have the address as, your employer's place, right? But if people look up your name, it'll match to your Google business name, and then people could leave a review for you. So then when it's time for you to finally open up your own office, you'll have that Google, business page, and then you just change the address. So then, your reviews never get tied to the employer's business. And instead, when you start your own business, people will be able to look you up and know exactly where you are. So I was able to hit the ground running because I had that existing patient base. But I mean, not patient base, but patient reviews, because when I left my old job, I wasn't allowed to transfer over. I mean, I wasn't allowed to reach out to the old patients and be like, hey, here's my new place, right? But my Zocdoc, which is a appointments platform, right? In New York City and some big cities, I was able to get like 3 new patients on the first day. So that was February of 2021. And on that day, I remember there was a big snowstorm. So it was a huge snowstorm, February 1st, 2021. And the physical therapist called me like on the Sunday before the Monday. And he was like, hey, we're not going to be open. Like physical therapy department's not going to be here tomorrow because of the snowstorm. But if you still want to go in, you could go in. Right. And I was like, yo, this is my first day, so I better go in. I got to make things auspicious. I got to set a precedent that even if there's a snowstorm, I'm going to come in. Right. Wow. So then I think because of that, that mentality that I set for myself. Like, hey,
Mm.
I've been fun employed for a while, I've been, all of this and that. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna hit the ground running. I'm gonna be there from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. I'm gonna try to be there
Wow.
6 days a week, in order to get my business going. Because some people wonder, weren't you afraid that you weren't gonna have people come in? Weren't you afraid that like people wouldn't find you or whatever? But because, and most people when they first start off, they might only put a few like hours a week into their business, right? Maybe they'll do like only 2 days a week, only 3 days a week, maybe for only 4 or 5 hours, but then if you're not there for the odd hours of the day, the early hours, the late hours, then you're losing that traffic. So if you want to start a business that's successful, get the reviews, be willing to have the long hours, and know that it doesn't take much to start your own business if you could like think outside of the box, because you don't need like that huge bank loan, that long lease to buy all of your own equipment. You could start off working at an existing office, but working for yourself. So, yeah. So,
Wow, a lot of gems there. Yeah, I think people don't realize, like you said, like the old school, like people think newspapers and stuff like that. But really, our generation and basically every generation after this, online reviews are always going to be very
oh
important,
yeah,
right? That's why there's
oh yeah,
multi-billion-dollar companies like AngelList, like Yelp, like all these, there's all these, and then Zocdoc, right? It's like
oh yeah.
if you don't master like the Google reviews and all that stuff, then I feel like you're almost doing yourself a disservice, because every new generation is going to be using online moving forward.
Yes. Every new generation uses online stuff, and you have to figure out how you could accommodate always being one step ahead, or utilizing these things that are supposed to help your business. Like when I first tried to start getting more reviews for my business, I used an app. Well, I used this service, this company that would send an email to a patient, and then in that email, there's like it asks, so how was your visit with Dr.Anna D? And then it leaves 5 stars for you to possibly click. So if the patient clicked on 5, then a pop-up will pop up and it says, oh, do you mind leaving a review on Yelp, on Google, or whatever, right? And if it was 4 or below, then it says, how could we have done better, right? So I thought this was what I needed. I was paying like $80 a month for this. I was just like simply, inputting the patient's email address and then just clicking, all right, send. And what I was noticing was that the patients were clicking 5, the ones that do open up the email were clicking 5, but then when the pop-up pops up, they don't follow through with it. So it wasn't worth it, because it seems like it was still an impersonal way of asking for the review, right? The patients felt that, and I feel that the patients thought, hey, I left the 5, she knows I appreciate her, that's all I need to do, right? But what I noticed was that if I actually sent an email, a personal email to the patient after the visit, giving like aftercare stuff, giving like exercise stuff, and then, leaving at the bottom, by the way, if you liked your experience, could you please leave a review on Zocdoc? Or like putting a link, click here to leave a review on Yelp, click here to leave a review on Google. People were more likely to follow through with leaving the review, because it was like right there in that email after they've read everything. Because I experimented with having that, like, oh, by the way, leave a review on the PS section, and people weren't following through with it because they read the sincerely Anna D, and then they didn't read the PS part. So you got to put, by the way, can you leave a review before the sincerely part, before the closure. And then I found that people were leaving reviews a lot. Another awesome thing that I suggest is to make sure that your system is integrated with all this like new technology. It might be hard at first, and that's why some of the older doctors have a slightly harder time getting like new patients, except for their own original patient base. What I noticed is that older doctors are still doing a lot of stuff by paper and like book.
Mm.
They're handwriting everything down. Uh, but
Mm.
if you have an advanced system that's integrated with, like, let's say for like online scheduling, right? Then the patients are more likely to return, because there's a lot that will say, hey, I don't know the next time I'm going to come in. Then you just say, hey, you could just go online and find out when I'm available. And the nice thing about that is if you allow them to go online to book their next appointment on appointment platforms like Zocdoc, right? A pop-up will literally pop up and say, by the way, how was your experience with Dr. Anna D? And then the patient
Right.
will say, well, I'm already going to her, so she's doing good. So I guess I'll just leave her a 5, So
Yeah.
that's another great like review generating platform. So there's
Mm.
so many things that if you just utilize technology, like it'll just make your job so much easier.
That's great to hear, because as a salesperson who has worked at Yelp and a lot of like software companies, sometimes we're not as present because it takes time, right? Like once they implement something, usually you don't really see the results until like much later.
Mhm.
But sometimes I lose sight of, I forget like how much impact like a lot of the stuff that I'm supporting my clients with. Because usually, when that happens, like I mean, yeah, I think like we take it for granted, right? Because I'm like, oh, software is everywhere, but then I forget that like not everyone is using the latest technology
Mhm.
all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't
Um,
even know to get on Zoom for this call. I was like, all right, I'm ready for your phone call. And then you're like, did you get my invite for Zoom? And I was like, oh, geez, because as a chiropractor, I'm like not using these
oh, I see.
teleconference stuff.
Yeah, that's a
Everything
good
has been
point.
in person. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I guess because like I've worked at pretty much like some of the most innovative tech companies, so I'm like so used to it. This is like the thousandth time I'm on Zoom, and then like you said, like I forget that not everyone is basically using the same tools as I am all the time.
Yeah, I didn't even know that this was going to be a person-to-person thing, but it worked out. It worked out because we have a holiday dinner after this, so I
Oh,
was I was dressed relatively okay. I don't have my fake eyelashes on, which is what I'd like to have,
oh,
but it's okay. I
yeah,
think I
yeah.
think there's
I was like,
filters for Zoom to include that, but I couldn't even get my microphone working today, so this is the true me. So.
no, I mean, I don't want to skirt past that. Like, clearly, you offer like quality service, right? Like, that's the foundation of why you've been so successful, right? And I don't know if you give yourself enough credit that, like, oh, actually, the reason why I've been so successful is because I'm doing like a really good job too, right?
Yes. So I definitely believe that I'm doing a very good job because
Yeah.
if I knew there was another chiropractor that did like what I did, I would go like see them. You know what I mean? But there's also a number of different chiropractors who all like practice very, very differently,
Yeah.
and it all depends on what the patient's preference is. Like if some people just want to get in and get out, with me, like the patients come in and it's like all half-hour sessions, so everybody's a half-hour session, regardless if their insurance is high paying or low
Mm.
paying, or if they are someone who's like a self-pay, as in we're not doing insurance. So everybody is a very, very reasonable, like everybody's paying a very, very reasonable price. But of course, if every patient of mine was paying the discounted self-pay rates and stuff like that, I wouldn't be able to make ends meet,
Mm.
but it's the high paying patients insurances that kind of like make up for the ones who, might not be able to afford visits. So I might give them like some sort of a discount. But
Mm.
for the most part, everybody that comes in gets, the same treatment, because you never know if they end up having like better insurance one day, or they end up
Mm.
referring a friend or something. You don't want one person to only get like 10 minutes, and meanwhile, like another person getting like,
Mm.
a lot, like 30 minutes worth of care, so everything has to stay pretty consistent.
Mm.
But yeah, everybody kind of experiments with what works in terms of like every visit. Because at my old office, it used to be we would set a patient up on some like a modality like electric stimulation, and then we would leave them there while we go and work on the next patient, right? So that's how things used to work. The electric stim was more of like a buffer between patients.
Mm.
So you'd be able to see like a decent amount of patients like every hour. But then what I found was that if I am with them the entire half hour, right, then everybody knows that they have a half hour slot instead of booking two people in the same slot and having one person on electric stim, the other person on, you're working on, right? If you just give everybody, one single appointment slot and not be seeing two people at the same time, then it'll also help with not only better treatments because you're with the patient the whole time, you're not just leaving them there, right? But it also helps to with like scheduling, as in sometimes one of the patients will come in a little bit later, right? And then you're like, oh, so what am I going to do now, right? But if a patient comes in late now, they know that they're eating into their half-hour time slot, so they respect that time, right?
Yeah.
When it used to be that, if somebody came in late, it like threw everything off. So so one reason why I spend so much time with people is because it makes it easier on me and it makes it easier for them as well. And also, like, to be honest, like I could afford to see people every half an hour, but there are some people who like there's some chiropractors that spend maybe like 5 to 7 minutes on a patient, and that's just what works for them. So I'm not gonna tell them like, hey, like you should, why would I tell them to spend longer times with patients if that's what's been working out for them? But because these are probably sometimes chiropractors that are in network who are getting paid a lot less from insurances, so they have no choice but to spend like maybe 5 or 7 minutes, or they're in network and this is the new patient visit, and there are some new patients who say that they go to the chiropractor and they don't get treatment on the same day, right? And the reason why is because the chiropractor is really only limited to that same small amount of reimbursement. So why would they spend an extra amount of time doing, because it would essentially be like 2 visits on the same day for them, because they're getting paid like not that much from insurance companies. So if I'm getting paid more from insurance companies, I'm going to make sure that I make it worth it to the patient. Yeah,
that's pretty interesting. So I mean, this is a pretty loaded question, but like what do you think of like in the medical / insurance industry in America? Like, do you think that it works, or like it could be better?
So of course, America is very, capitalist, right? Where we want to give everybody an opportunity to, choose like good care and, pay less for like, possibly subpar care if, you can't afford it, right? So in America, like, the insurances that are government subsidized, like Medicaid, Medicare, and stuff like that, that doesn't cover chiropractic, right? But like commercial insurances cover chiropractic, but sometimes you have to, pay like into a deductible, right? So it's like you pay the insurance money, but then when you go see the chiropractor or go see a physical therapist, you still have to pay for the full visit before insurance even covers anything, which for some patients might be a surprise because, the only doctor they've ever gone to is the primary care physician or their annual OBGYN, and they usually don't have to pay anything, but that's because that's covered, right? So when patients come to see me, sometimes they're surprised that they're like, oh, wait, why do I have to pay for the full amount? Well, because your deductible hasn't been met yet or whatever. So there's a lot of people who really don't understand their insurance. And of course, this is not something that you learn at school, right? And this is not something that you even learn from your job or even the person who provides the insurance. People are like, what's the difference between a deductible a deductible and an out-of-pocket max. Those are both huge numbers. You know, people just kind of like look for what's the cheapest insurance that they could get, and then opt for that. Well, when you do that, then basically sometimes it's like not really any insurance at all. So,
Yeah.
but you know, of course, I try to make sure that it's affordable for patients who still have like that high deductible, that they could still come and see me. In fact, seeing me is like cheaper than like getting a massage somewhere as well, you know. But of
Yeah.
course, I'm a big fan of getting massages, you know. But of course, like with me, people see me, they pay their rate, they don't even have to tip, you know, and they're getting that half-hour session. So in most cases, it's actually like pretty worth it, you know. So there's definitely some patients who come in and, you know, don't realize that on their first visit, I spend like 15 minutes assessing their posture and telling them what got them to that point. Because, you know, I feel like, you know, and then like some parts of me are like, oh man, I just want to get them on that table already, because, you know, they're looking like they're in a lot of pain, but I know I have to explain to them what's happening first. So then even when they're getting the treatment, they, you know, they will know, oh, when she's stretching me, my joints are like plumping up, you know what I mean? Like they can visualize what's happening with their body, as opposed to me just like playing magic tricks, you know what I mean? Like they'll know what's happening. So let's see, I got to get back to your original question on what I think about the whole insurance situation right now. I mean, I don't think it's really going to change that much, because you know, different medical fields have different like political bodies of people like trying to get higher reimbursements from insurances. That even if we did universal health care, you know, certain providers are gonna want to be paid more than other providers. You know, if I'm getting, you know, the same payment as somebody who's in network, you know, I feel like I could still make ends meet, because it's fine with me. But then for some people, you know, they have like some like really crazy rents and, you know, crazy amounts of staff, that I don't know if things would, you know, they would make ends meet.
Interesting. Yeah. It's such a complex, it's like you said, it's not as simple as, right, because there's so many moving pieces and so many people, and then like you said, even politics is involved, right? So it's just a very complex situation. And as much as we hate on it, like at least in America, like we have access to quality health, right? I hear overseas
For
and other,
some people have access to it.
well, if you have money, I guess. But I mean, if you have money in any country, I feel like you have access in general. But I always hear when people are overseas and there's these places that were like, oh, they have like universal healthcare, and then they're like, yeah, then have to wait 4 hours to get something done, you know.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like the trade-off.
yeah. Chiropractic in America, fortunately, is covered under insurances, because chiropractic was basically found in America. And, you know, we've had to grow a very strong political body to try to make sure that we get paid by insurances without the need of a referral from an MD. Because back when we first started, you know, similar to many other health professions, you know, when we first started, chiropractic was associated with a lot of other like pseudoscience things, like magnetism, using magnets to heal the body, or, you know, claims that chiropractic could help with like curing people's hearing and stuff like that. So of course the medical community like was not recommending or encouraging chiropractic. So because of that, chiropractors had to fight with insurance companies to get direct access, which means, you know, to not need an MD for a referral to see them. And because of that, medical doctors have never really needed to write any referrals for chiropractors. And in fact, you know, never really suggest chiropractic as an option, because they're not taught in school how to refer to a chiropractor. You know, and not only that, the patients for the most part aren't even, you know, going to the medical doctor and asking for a referral, because for the most part, their insurances don't request them to ask for the referral. So when it comes to that, you know, I'm very happy and blessed to be in a country that, you know, will pay for this type of service, because, you know, this is something that's usually a cash thing in Europe and Asia,
Mm,
and everywhere else except for America and Canada. So, but Canada is, I think Canada is a universal healthcare that actually does cover chiropractic. So that's
yeah.
something I haven't really looked into too like that much, but it works there.
Hmm. You know what's interesting? I didn't realize this, but a lot of my friends became ODs, like doctors of
Yes,
osteo.
DOs. Yes, DOs. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, and that like confused me because I mean I'm sure they don't go as detailed as like getting like yours, right? But they do learn some of these things, and I'm like, well, you can do like adjustments, like that's to me like I was so
Yes.
surprised that they learned that in school.
Yes, so doctors of osteopathy are taught how to do that, and that's what really sets them apart. That they could do like adjustments in here and this and that.
Yeah,
However, I think what they realize is that because their profession also allows them to do medical stuff and get
right,
reimbursed for medical stuff, it's much more profitable to just be a medical doctor that prescribes and sees like patients for the common ailments that aren't musculoskeletal. So then
right.
doctors of osteopathy usually don't really do too much manipulation, as in like
Yeah.
like hands on, like moving the joints or the muscle in a certain direction. But there are some that are like that. But yeah, it is something that's in their toolkit, but not a lot of them like actually practice that way.
Yeah, that's very accurate. My best friend, he went to Rowan, or I guess it used to be UMDNJ. So a lot of their friends, like when I hang out with them, like there's only one guy that will like just for fun, like will do it for
Yeah,
me and my wife. But yeah, everyone else like they don't do it, and like only in school when they were in school like they would do it. But
and that's
nowadays like it's they don't even
exactly.
mess with it anymore, really.
Yeah,
So
they could bill for it, but it's a lot of work, like, I could
yeah,
bill for it, but I spend like 30 minutes with the patient.
yeah.
So,
Hmm.
yeah.
That's pretty cool. Like, yeah, you're clearly very knowledgeable and very passionate about what you do. And it's interesting, right? Because I do think there's still some people that they're like, oh, well, show me the science and show me. But then at the end of the day, like
Um,
I always feel good after our sessions. I'm like, well, I don't care about the science if I just feel great
um,
afterwards, right? You know?
Yes, because there's definitely a lot of chiropractors who like on your first visit, they just do like, reflex testing. They have you look up, they have you look left, they have you look right, and then like ask if there's any pain and spend a lot of time just like doing that. But I
Hmm.
found that the most beneficial visit would be a visit where the patient comes in and I literally look at their posture and how they're standing and
Hmm.
explain to them exactly what muscles are painful and why it's painful. And they could visually see that, these like this is literally how their body is. So because I don't want the patients to think I'm like performing magic tricks, you know what I mean? Like I want them
Yeah.
to understand what got them to that position so that they'll understand like why the exercises are important that I show them and why certain things that I do are therapeutic, because
Hmm.
when a patient can visualize their bodies like healing, it's better than I'm pressing buttons and it's making things better. They're like, oh,
Hmm.
she's doing this for this reason, she's doing this for this reason. And
Hmm.
I feel that might certain chiropractors might not be communicating things very well because the patient might say,
Right.
I got neck pain, and the chiropractor is like, okay, lay face down, because maybe they just don't have the time. They got to get to the next patient, like if you go to a
Hmm.
doctor and they're telling you to take a pill, they're not telling you, all right, well, this is the pathway that the pill is going to,
Hmm.
reach your brain, and this is what the pill is going to do. Some providers just don't have the time to explain. Unfortunately, with me, I do like the whole 30-minute sessions. I explain everything. So,
Hmm.
yeah, that it benefits me, it benefits the patients. It's good.
That's a good point. You are much more communicative than yeah, than most medical professionals and compared to other chiropractors as well. Like you do take the time to and it's interesting. Yeah, I think in our society, maybe because we're such a capitalistic society, like you said, like it's almost like when you're getting paid like per hour or whatever, it's hard not to view like time as money, you know?
Oh yeah, it's hard to view things like that. And another thing is that they always say that if you plan to expand and maybe like hire somebody else, which I do plan on doing soon, they say to, step back and see how you can make things more efficient. Before you hire somebody else, see how you can make things more efficient. So, I guess what I could do is I could spend like 15 minutes on a patient and they would still get better and stuff. But, personally, like it's just much more easier for me and for the patient. And it's much more easier and slow pace if I just do the half-hour sessions. And even with, doing half-hour sessions with patients, I still am able to make ends meet, and I'm still like making far more than I've ever made as an associate, which is why I was able to, make the donations that I did this year, because it was just
Mm,
like money that I didn't even expect to get. You know what I mean? Like
mm,
some patients who I would like get not that much from, as in like with their insurance ends up paying me a lot more, and I'm like, you know what, I'll just give
mm,
away the extra, because like I didn't expect it. Or some patients might come in who work for a like charitable, or a company that really needs donations, and I'll just be like, you know what, I'll just give you some of my profits or whatever. It's like I've got,
mm,
I mean, I don't want to like go around and say like I've got like, oh, I've got all this like money like sitting around that I don't have anything to do with it, because of course I still value the money, because I remember when I first made my first uh, you know donation to like anti-Asian hate crimes, right? That was my very first donation ever, and this was maybe like a month and a half or something out of just starting my business, right? Maybe like 2 months after starting my business. And I knew the moment that I would donate, and I donated like 1,000. I knew that the moment that I donated 1,000, my sister was gonna probably message me and be like, yo, why'd you donate $1,000, right? Because I knew that she would say like, that's like grandma's New Year's money. You know what I mean? Like, because my parents, because this was close to Chinese New Year's, which was like in
oh
like
yeah.
mid-February. So, I remember my parents both gave me like, $100, and then they were like, oh, and this is from grandma, and it's like $200, right? And I was like, oh, thank you so much, right? And I was very, very appreciative that they were giving me like, this like hard-earned money from them. And, of course, like my grandma, she's like not making much money.
Mm,
It's like all government stuff. So
mm,
like my sister was seeing it as like me giving away my parents' money
mm,
and my grandma's money. You know what I mean? She was like, and like, I felt bad too, but then I had that extra money. And if I keep on like associating with any money that I spend or anything that I donate as like, you know, as the hours and effort that my
mm,
parents put in to get that
mm,
money, right? Then, then I would be doing a disservice to myself, as in I wouldn't be, like, I don't know, like treating myself well, and I wouldn't be treating, the community with like all of this money if I just like held it like in the bank account and like not gave it back. You know what I mean?
mm,
So like so that's been a big change, like seeing the money that's generated in terms of how many hours I put in versus how many hours my parents or my grandma would have had to put in for that same
mm,
amount of money, and my giving does not mean that I'm not going to give back to my own family, and I'm not going to give back to my sister, and that, you know, because like my sister was like, oh, you should, take that money and pay off your student loans with that money. Of course, my student loans will get paid eventually,
mm,
but like as of right now, I've got this extra money to give, and might as well. And if I'm in a good stable situation where I could give at my age, why wait until I'm like
mm.
40 and have paid off everything to start giving back, if I can give back
Mm.
now, you know?
Yeah, I feel like the way your mindset is like, it's I feel like you're the perfect example of like just like good karma, you know? Like
Oh,
clearly you're doing a lot of good in the world, and because you're giving back into this universe, like the universe like has rewarded you with like,
ah,
obviously like a lot of things like starting your own business and having clients, and like just it's very obvious to me at least that like, oh, the
ah,
more good we put in the universe, like it's sometimes you can't explain it, right? To like, it sounds like your sister is
that's
more
it.
rational.
Yeah,
Sometimes you can't
she
explain it to people, but it always comes back. It's just hard to see it sometimes, like in that moment.
definitely does come back. And also, I've been fortunate to even have that extra money to give away. The universe has given me like this like surplus, and I've recognized it as a surplus that I could give part of it back, as
Mm,
opposed to being like, oh, thanks for the surplus, I'm gonna hoard it for hard times,
mm,
because because I've been privileged, right? Like I've been privileged to be able to give the money back. And
mm,
I think there'd be a lot of people if they had the extra money to give, and if they had a business, that was doing very, very good. Like it's even easier to give, because then, if I personally gave like $1,000 for Asian hate crimes, like I wouldn't post like $1,000 Anna D. I gave this away, But if it was my business that gave that, then like posting, oh, the business gave $1,000, then it's like, oh, okay, great. People feel that they could contribute to my donations by coming, as opposed to just be like, oh, okay,
mm,
I'm glad Anna gave $1,000, But if I post that I gave $1,000 and this is a business, people are like, oh, okay, this is direct like business funds going to it. And not
mm,
only that, but it's because it's a business fund, I could just, and this is the same with like even people who give personal funds, like, it's you give that money and it's not going to get taxed. You know what
right.
I mean? So I just like give that money, and then it feels like it, that same amount of money isn't the same as like, something that would get taxed. Like if I bought like a computer for $1,000, you know what I mean? This
Mm,
is like, you give $1,000, but that's technically, only like $600 in your part, because it doesn't include the
mm.
40% tax. So I mean, yeah, yeah. So
I'm present too from your sharing. Like as weird as complex as our American society is in terms of the tax and insurance and medical systems, like it all works, right? And at the end of the day, every country has its own problems and its own pros and cons. But I'm present to that, like, hey, like there's a reason why they do some of these things, and sometimes we don't understand because we're not like a tax accountant, or
uh-huh.
or most people aren't business owners yet, right? But then it's like, okay, like there's a reason why they have these and sometimes it's having faith and trust that like it's going to work out, and not stressing so much about the future.
Oh yeah. Basically, when I first started practice, I still didn't know that much about billing, because of course, I didn't have like a billing team or anything like that. I was sending out my own bills. And then when I was sending out my first bills, I was like, oh shoot, is insurance gonna believe me that I saw this person today? You know what I mean?
Mm,
So I send out the bills, and sat back, and next thing you know, insurance started like paying me. They sent me the checks. So it was like
mm,
all the doubts that I had like just like melted away. And then since then, it like everything's just been relatively smooth sailing for me. So I've been
mm,
very, very happy about that. But of course, I'm also, here like 65 hours a week, but because
mm,
I like what I'm doing, it doesn't really feel that much like
mm.
work at all. So I'm very lucky to do something that's just comes so easily, and makes me happy and makes the patients happy.
Yeah, I feel like your mentality is very different than like a lot of Asians, like typical Asians, right? I feel like, I mean, it's like, well, I guess, there's Asians obviously that have like their own businesses, like restaurants or nail salons, or, like different, like the generation that came before us. So maybe not, but I do think like we tend to, maybe because when we come here as immigrants, like, they've endured a lot more risk and less stability. So sometimes it's hard for them to see like some of the things that we see, you know, and like you said, we are privileged that we have a little bit more, like, for the most part, we've had a lot of prosperity in our lifetime, right? Like minus like like one or two recessions, and they probably have seen a lot worse, like in terms of like the ups and downs of life.
Yeah, yeah, we're both very, very lucky, and we recognize, we recognize how much, I don't want to use the word privilege, but like, we recognize how things have worked out for us,
Yeah,
and we want to make sure that things work out for other people as well.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I know we're at time, but this has been really helpful. I think a lot of people will learn a lot from, like, whether they're curious in starting their own practice one day, or yeah, it's clearly, it makes sense why you've been seeing a lot of success. I think you're doing such a you're putting good energy out there in the world and you're receiving it back. And I'm just happy that you're seeing the success you're seeing. And I'm also grateful that you've been able to contribute like so many, in so many ways, like beyond like the donations and just the clearing you are for the world. So thank you so much
Oh, thanks.
for being
Thanks,
the
Davidson.
awesome person you are.
Thanks, Davidson. It was nice talking with you. Thank you for arranging this time, and I look forward to seeing you in person somewhere.
Yes,
And if,
yeah.
of course, if anybody ever wants to get in contact with me, they could always
Yeah.
email me. They could always call. They could always even text my business line as well. This is all stuff that you'd be able to find online just by looking my name up, Anna D,
Oh
ANNADI.
yeah, yeah. I'll post your email, your website, and your Zocdoc and all that good stuff.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you so much, Davidson.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I gotta get back to work.
Okay, take care.
All right, take care.